Hi, welcome back to Christine's Home Affairs. For the past 12 months or so, I've been wanting to make a paper saver notebook cover. What was holding me back was that I didn't have any Peltex or stiff enough stabiliser to use in the product. I went away and visited Mum last week, went to my supplier, and I finally found a product that I can use. You know, I love to rescue fabric wherever I can and try not to be too wasteful with the things that I do. Chris and I use a lot of paper just in our everyday lives. We use a lot of paper, and most of the time we only ever use one side. So it's been bugging me for such a long time, and I wanted to just make a cover that we could reuse these sheets. The Paper Saver notebook cover that we're making today is going to fit the A4 size paper, the US letter paper, and it will also fit the legal sized paper. I've made it big enough to fit all three of those sizes. Come along and I'll show you how we go about making this. Okay, let's see what we need. I have one piece of fabric that is 10.5 inches by 14.5 inches. We need one for the main fabric, and we also need one for the lining. Now, the main fabric is the outside of the book cover. Your inside fabric will be 10.5 by 14.5 inches. We want a piece of Peltex or really stiff stabiliser, and that will be 9.5 inches by 13.5 inches. And this is optional. If you want to have a tab to close your book, then have some Peltex, which is 1.5 inches by 3 3/4, and one piece each of the main and the lining fabric, 2.5 inches by 4 3/4 inch. So pretty much what you're going to have is whatever size you have your Peltex or your stabiliser, your fabric is going to be an inch bigger on each side for the entire project. I'll explain the reason why I'm having it that much bigger shortly. The other thing we want is a piece of ribbon for the centre of the booklet, and I'm just using a grosgrain ribbon. It's only about 3/8 of an inch. We don't want to have it too wide, and I'm using a magnetic closure as well, so I'm going to have that on the tab. So if you decide not to have the tab, then you won't need the closure at all, but you will need the ribbon. Okay, the first thing we want to do is mark a curve on our tab. I'm just going to use the curve on a cotton reel and place that over the Peltex and mark a curve around the top there, and then I'll trim that. I'm just going to talk to you about stabiliser for a minute. The one that I'm using is actually a Matilda's Own bag batting. I'm finding it really difficult to get Peltex in Australia. This is the closest I can come to it. Only problem is it's not fusible. This is Peltex. This is just a scrap that I have left. It's fusible on one side, and it's really nice to use in these sorts of things. I've made loads of wallets with them. The thickness of the Peltex and the bag batting are very, very similar. There's very little difference between them at all, probably about 0.5 millimetre or 1 millimetre if anything. But if you can get a fusible stabiliser like Peltex, this would be perfect. Decaville will work as well. So the one I'm using is the Matilda's Own bag batting, and I think it's only available in Australia. Because Peltex is fusible, if you can get it, then that'll be the best thing to use. So I've marked the curve, and I also want to mark a little curve on each corner of my book cover. Take whatever you're going to use for a circle and mark that on the corner, and I'll fold this in half, line that up, and I'll cut them both at the same time. So that just gives us a nice curve for our book cover. Back to the tab, we've got our lining piece and our main piece. We need to put a magnetic closure on the wrong side, so on the lining piece of our fabric, and it doesn't matter which side you use. I'd actually like a flat edge on my book, so I'm going to use the thicker part of my magnetic snap on the inside of my tab. When we've put our book together, we're going to have this facing up and that on the outside, and we want our tab to come from the side seam and fold over. Turn that so that the fabric's face down. If you don't have access to magnetic snaps, use Velcro or just those sew-in snap buttons. Decide whereabouts you want to have your magnetic closure, and I'm just going to make a mark. So I've made an outline and I need to put a little hole in the Peltex and in the fabric. I want my snap to actually go through both layers. Place the point of your seam ripper in the bottom of the mark that you made and then bring it up at the top of the mark that you've made. And by doing that, it'll prevent you from actually cutting any further. So all you do is just rip that and you've made a little slit there. Now, if you've got Peltex and it's fusible, go and fuse this onto the main fabric and this piece for the tab onto the lining fabric. Because mine's not fusible, I'm just going to have to make do as it is. Pop your magnet through and place the washer over the top and spread the prongs apart. Take the outer fabric, place that over the top, and we'll take this to the machine and we're going to sew along the side edge here, around the curve, and along this edge here, and leave this open. Do a back stitch here and at the end. When you're sewing this, we're going to be stitching right beside the edge of the Peltex here, but because there's a little bit of thickness in this, it's probably about 1/8 of an inch or 2 to 3 millimeters. If you sew directly beside the Peltex here, then when you turn your fabric through, it's going to be very, very tight and cause rippling or bunching up. So because the Peltex has that height there, we want to actually stitch that distance away. So I'm going to sew about 1/8 of an inch beside that Peltex. It'll be my guide, but I won't be sewing right on the line. So I want to have some airspace there. When I turn that through, it's going to be much more comfortable and the whole project will sit a lot flatter. I'll show you an example of one I did earlier where I didn't leave enough space between the Peltex and the fabric. Let's take this to the machine and we'll stitch around there. So you can see here, there's my row of stitching and there's some space between the edge of the Peltex and the stitching. When that's turned through later, that's going to make the Peltex sit nice and flat. And this is the reason why I'm actually using a 1/2 inch extra fabric around the stabilizer instead of just 1/4 of an inch. Now we can trim the curve. We don't want to cut too close to the curve. You can trim the side if you've got too much space there. Clip the curve just to help that relax a little when we turn it the right way around. If you've fused your Peltex to your fabric, this is going to be easier to turn through. And this is actually the hardest part of the whole project. Take the curve of your fabric and just push that through. Then you can use the edge of a pen just to help push that through. Once you've turned this the right way around, take it back to the machine and top stitch all the way around. You don't need to worry about this opening here because that will be hidden away inside the book cover. Okay, the top stitching's done, and you can see because we've allowed that little bit of extra stitching space next to the Peltex and the fabric, it's just helped it sit a lot better. It's not trying to pull itself up. We now need to mark the position for the snap that this is going to close over. Find the center of your Peltex. So my center is just here, and I want to come in 1 inch from the side. So that will be the center position of my magnetic snap. I'll mark the area where the slits have to go. And now we can place our main fabric face down, so we want right side down. Evenly place your Peltex down onto your fabric and we'll pin that in place just so that it doesn't shift while we make these slits. Again, if you've got a fusible product, you can iron that straight down onto the outside of your fabric. I'm going to come in at the bottom and come out carefully at the top through the layer of Peltex as well as the fabric layer. So you can see there's a little bit of the needle going through there. And repeat on the other side. And then we can take the other side of our prong and fit that in there. And again, we'll place our washer over the top and we're good to go. Our flap is going to sit on our book cover like this. Take the fabric for the inside of your cover, place that face up, and we're going to take our tab and we're going to place that with the fabric facing the fabric and faced together like that. So we want the outside part of our tab faced up and centered. I'll just find the center of this and I'll place my tab right on the very edge of the fabric. Remember, you've got the edge of the Peltex just on the inside there. That's going to be roughly our seam allowance. Put a pin in place so that this doesn't shift. Fold the fabric in half this way and just finger press a crease and place your ribbon directly over that crease. So we want that right over the center of the crease. You don't have to have it tight, just let it sit comfortably, and we'll pin that. And then we'll take our main fabric with the Peltex on it and place that directly over the top of all of these pieces. We want the end with a magnetic snap to our left, and we want the tab and magnetic snap on our right. So line that all up and pin it together. Okay, that's all pinned together now. We're going to take this to the machine and we're going to do exactly the same thing as far as stitching around the edges are concerned. We don't want to stitch right on the very edge of the Peltex. Come away about 1/8 of an inch or 2 to 3 millimeters to allow for the rise in the stabilizer. I'm going to start here with a back stitch, come all the way around, follow the curve, come back around here and end with a back stitch here and leave this section open for turning through. When I come to the top and the bottom, I'm going to double stitch this section here because that's where my little tape is. Also in this spot here where I've got my tab, I'll triple stitch over that. So back stitch here. And when you get to that piece of ribbon that's in the middle, I'm going to triple stitch over that. I'll triple stitch over the section where the tab is. You can see that I have left a little bit of a gap all the way around the side of the Peltex there. I'm going to trim the curve on all 4 corners. And if you've got any ribbon sticking out, you can trim that off as well. And then we can turn this the right way around. So if you're using a product that isn't fusible, it's a little bit more awkward to bring everything through. Turn the main part through first and then bring the Peltex through afterward. It's really just like putting the quilt or a duvet inside its cover. You've just got to find the corners and then everything will fit nicely. Once you're happy with the placement of everything and your curves are looking nice, we're ready to top stitch this and then we're almost finished. Don't forget this center tab here. Bring that around to the inside and we'll fold these edges under here and then we're going to top stitch all the way around. Okay, before you top stitch, just make sure that you don't have any of the edges from this side showing through on the front. If there is, you can just curl it under as you're sewing. So I'll top stitch all the way around there. Okay, we are almost finished. Now you can actually finish this up right here if you like, but what I'm going to do is create a spine so that when I've got paper in here, I can actually have this sitting more like a book. And the width of this ribbon is what I'm going to use as the width of my spine. So just take a ruler and line up the edge of your ruler with the edge of your ribbon and just mark a straight line there. And that line I've drawn here is going to be my stitching line. I'm going to do 2 of those, so I'll flip that around and line up the ruler on the other side of the ribbon. And I'm going back to the machine. I'm going to do a row of stitching on either side of the ribbon. I don't want to sew the ribbon down any further than it already has been, but so I'll move that out of the way, stitch down either side. Now when I've done the top stitching, I have actually gone and stitched over the ribbon a couple of times as well. It's a stress point. Whenever I have stress points, I always make sure I give that some extra support. Let's go back to the machine. Okay, now we definitely are finished. Grab some paper. So I've just got a couple of sheets of pre-loved paper here. Place that on the inside. You've got the ribbon holding the paper in the centre there, and then you can use it for whatever notes you might like to make. And with the spine stitched along the sides here, this book will now fold over really easily. Put your snap over, and there you have a nice eco-friendly notebook holder. Now you'll see here that I've actually left quite a lot of room on my tab. This is intentional because some people might like the option of putting a pen on the inside here. And if you want to do that, you can actually just slide your pen in here. One other thing that you can do is actually measure where your pen is going to go and stitch the flap closed right on the very edge, next to the edge of your book cover. And then you can have a little loop there for putting your pen in place. I'm not going to do that because I want my tab to actually open out, but it's an option. If you don't like that, you can actually make your tab a little bit shorter. You can take another inch off the overall length of your tab. Earlier in the video, I mentioned about stitching away from your stabilizer a little bit, and this is what happens if you stitch really close to it. So this is the one I made earlier. And you can see how puffy it is. It's because the stabilizer in here is way too tight. I've stitched right beside the edge of the stabilizer, and it's just puffing up like a piece of foam squashed into a pillow. It makes a huge difference if you go and stitch about 1/8 of an inch away from the Peltex, and that just allows for the thickness of the product that you use. So this one here I won't sell, I'll end up using it myself, but that's fine, I needed something anyway. So I've been a busy little beaver this evening and made up a few of these notebook holders. The ones I've done today have all been made with upholstery fabric on the outside and regular quilting cotton on the inside, just a little bit of grosgrain ribbon and that stiff Peltex type stabilizer. And here it is with the paper on the inside. So I can see myself filling this right up and having loads of note paper here ready to make notes when I do my next patterns. I've made a few of these because I actually plan on selling them in the shop. Now that I finally managed to get some stabilizer that is strong enough, I'm going to put these in the shop. They take about 15 to 20 minutes to make. I might try these at $20 each, see how they go. I think the people that are a little bit more aware of society's wastage are going to actually really like these. So I will try them in the shop at $20 each. I haven't put any labels on here yet. You know what? I think that I'm actually going to put my label down in the bottom right-hand corner. Yes, that's what I'm going to do. Anyway, wish me luck. Hopefully I'll get to sell lots of them. I've got to make lots more of them first. As I said earlier, that little tip about sewing about 1/8 of an inch away from the edge of the Peltex will make all the difference in your finished product. This is the first one that I did that is quite bubbly. So the other two I stitched a little bit further away and they sit much nicer as a notebook cover. That's my lesson learned. I hope you have enjoyed this video and I shall catch you next time. Bye for now.